It was a Tuesday evening that promised nothing more than the ordinary hum of routine. Flight 412 from Dallas to New York had already settled into its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Outside, the fading light of the late autumn sun cast a golden glow across the clouds, streaking the sky in orange and violet. Inside the cabin, passengers reclined in their seats, some lost in movies, others scrolling endlessly on their phones, a few attempting the impossible, to sleep through the turbulence that rarely came but always threatened. Among them in seat 8A sat Emily Carter, 22, recent college graduate and fresh from an internship that left her both exhausted and exhilarated. Her head rested lightly against the window, headphones tangled around her neck, eyes closed, small breaths marking the rhythm of sleep. Her laptop, forgotten in the tray in front of her, hummed quietly as the battery drained, a gentle reminder of emails she would have to face the next morning. The flight had begun peacefully. The flight attendants had already made their usual rounds, offering drinks, reminding passengers to buckle up, cracking light jokes to mask the monotony of a long, uneventful night flight. The hum of the engines was constant, a background lullaby for those attempting to doze, and the occasional murmur from a passenger or the clatter of a beverage cart punctuated the soft noise. Emily had barely noticed the takeoff, her mind still buzzing from the last-minute tasks she had rushed through before boarding. For the first hour, everything remained perfectly normal. A young couple in 7D and 7E whispered about their honeymoon in New York. A businessman across the aisle scrolled through market reports, and a little boy in row 10 excitedly poked his tablet, watching animated dinosaurs battle across the screen. The cabin lights were dimmed, a soft amber glow illuminating only the aisle, and Emily drifted deeper into sleep, her mind wandering between the recent memory of her graduation and the quiet anticipation of a new life waiting in New York. Then came a subtle shift, barely perceptible at first. The plane shivered, a light tremor running through the seats and the floor beneath them. Emily stirred, a frown forming as she blinked awake. At first she thought it might be turbulence, a minor, routine jolt, but something about it felt different. The hum of the engines didn't quite mask the subtle vibration under her seat, a vibration that was uneven, almost anxious. Heads began to lift across the cabin. Murmurs spread like wildfire. A man in 6C muttered, "Did anyone else feel that?" A flight attendant paused mid-step, a serving tray balanced carefully, and exchanged a glance with another attendant. Something was off, and though no one wanted to voice the fear aloud, it hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Emily sat up fully now, her senses sharpening instantly. The calm, sleepy haze that had enveloped her vanished, replaced by a prickle of unease crawling across her skin. She glanced around the cabin, nodding faces twisted in confusion and uncertainty. Some passengers fumbled for their seatbelts, others reached for phones, desperate to check messages or call loved ones. The little boy in 10B whimpered quietly, sensing the tension of those around him. Then the intercom crackled to life. A voice, the captain's voice, calm but taut with tension, echoed through the cabin, stopping conversations and silencing the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We have an emergency." The words were simple, but the tone carried the weight of unspoken danger. Emily's stomach dropped. She gripped the armrests instinctively, muscles tightening as the words sank in. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed glances. A mother whispered to her child, "It's going to be okay, sweetie," though her own voice wavered. The plane shuddered again, this time with more force. Cups rattled on trays, a soda can teetered dangerously, and a man several rows back let out a sharp, startled gasp. Emily felt the cabin tilt slightly, a subtle but unmistakable movement that sent her body pressing instinctively against the seat. She glanced toward the front, where the flight attendants now moved with unusual urgency, their calm, professional demeanor replaced by quick, precise movements that betrayed underlying fear. Emily's mind raced. Emergencies on planes were statistically rare, she knew, but statistics felt meaningless in the moment. She tried to breathe steadily, to anchor herself in the present, but the sense of impending danger was impossible to ignore. The captain spoke again, voice sharper, almost cracking. "We have lost one engine. The second is showing critical failure. Please remain seated and brace for rapid descent." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt the grip of panic in the pit of her stomach but forced herself to stay still, to observe, to think. Beside her, an elderly man clutched the armrests with knuckles white as paper, muttering a quiet prayer under his breath. Across the aisle, a woman sobbed silently, her forehead pressed against the window, eyes wide with fear. Emily's mind raced. She remembered her cousin, an Air Force pilot, teaching her as a teenager about the importance of keeping calm in emergencies, about controlling the only thing you could, yourself. At the time, she had laughed at his intensity, brushed off the drills as overcautious. Now every word, every lesson drilled into her seemed to flash across her mind in rapid-fire succession. The plane lurched violently, a force that pressed her chest to the seatback. The overhead bins rattled ominously. A scream pierced the cabin, short and raw, cutting through the buzz of panic. Emily's gaze snapped upward as she realized that what was happening was no ordinary turbulence. The plane wasn't just descending, it was fighting against something unseen, some force that no one on board fully understood. Flight attendants moved with deliberate urgency, checking seatbelts, shouting instructions over the rising din of panicked passengers. Emily's eyes locked with theirs for a moment. There was fear in their expressions. Yes, but also determination, a steely resolve to protect the people in their care. Emily glanced out the window. The stars were distant, cold, indifferent. Below, the earth seemed impossibly far, unreachable. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation settle over her. This was no ordinary flight. Something had gone wrong, and the next few minutes could decide the fate of everyone on board. And then, just as quickly as the fear began to fully grip her, another jolt ran through the plane. The lights flickered. The engine's hum dropped to a low, ominous growl. The captain's voice returned, tense but controlled, cutting through the panic like a lifeline. "If anyone on board has experience in aviation, we may need your assistance. Please, now is the time to speak up." Emily's heart skipped. Experience. She wasn't a licensed pilot. Her degree was in aviation theory, not practical flying. But she remembered simulator hours from college, hours spent learning how to respond to emergencies, hours that felt almost useless until now. A strange calm washed over her in the midst of chaos. The plane shuddered again and she gripped her armrest, making a silent promise. "If anyone can do something, it's me. I can't fail, not here, not now." The cabin remained tense, a collective breath held in fear and uncertainty. Passengers looked around, desperate, searching for someone to take charge, someone to lead them out of the nightmare. Emily stared straight ahead, toward the cockpit, toward the voice that had just called for help. And in that instant she realized her life and the lives of everyone on Flight 412 were about to change forever. The plane trembled again, more violently this time, a sudden lurch that threw loose items to the floor and sent passengers gripping their armrests in terror. Emily's pulse surged. She closed her eyes for a moment, counting silently, grounding herself in the chaos. The intercom crackled again, the captain's voice sharper, almost pleading. "Ladies and gentlemen, brace. We are descending rapidly. Please stay calm and follow instructions." Emily opened her eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. She looked around, seeing the fear etched on every face, the mother holding her child, the man in 6C muttering prayers, the elderly woman whose hands shook as she gripped her seatbelt. And then she made a decision. She would not sit back. She would not wait. She would do everything she could to help. And with that thought, Emily felt something awaken in her, a determination, a courage she hadn't known she possessed. The plane shuddered violently once more, the cabin lights flickered, and Emily realized that the real test was about to begin. Because somewhere ahead, beyond the hum of engines and the trembling fuselage, the true danger of Flight 412 waited. And Emily, just a passenger in 8A, would soon be thrust into a situation that no one on board could have imagined, and no one would ever forget. The cabin was a storm of whispers, gasps, and trembling hands. Every jolt of the plane sent heads snapping up, hearts hammering against ribs like trapped birds. Emily sat upright in 8A, knuckles white on the armrests, her mind a whirlwind of fear, calculation, and sudden clarity. She could no longer pretend she was a passenger. The captain's plea for help rang in her ears, sharp and desperate. "If anyone on board has experience in aviation, we may need your assistance." Beside her, an elderly man clutched his chest, muttering a prayer so low Emily barely caught it. "God, protect us." She felt the child in 10B squirming, his small hands clutching the arm of his seat, eyes wide, filled with uncomprehending terror. The cabin, once dull with monotony, had become a stage of pure, raw emotion. Every passenger stared at the intercom at each other, looking for guidance, for hope, for someone, anyone, to take charge. Emily's thoughts raced. She had the knowledge, at least in theory, from her college simulator classes. Not much practical flying, certainly no real-world experience handling a crisis like this. But she had something most others did not: calm under pressure. The irony was almost cruel. This is what all those simulator hours were for, and now it matters. The plane shuddered violently again, sending a ripple of panic through the cabin. A soda can toppled off a tray, bouncing along the floor like a small metallic warning. Overhead bins rattled. Flight attendants grabbed for support, shouting instructions to passengers. "Stay calm, buckle in, brace for turbulence." Their faces betrayed the faintest trace of panic, but their voices were trained, practiced, precise. Emily took a deep breath, trying to center herself. She had to act fast. Hesitation now could cost lives. The intercom crackled again, the captain's voice strained. "We have lost one engine. The second is showing critical failure. Oxygen masks may deploy. Remain seated. Remain calm. If anyone has experience flying, simulation or otherwise, please make yourself known." Emily's stomach sank. She was literally being called out from the safety of her seat. Her hands trembled as she raised one slowly. The murmurs in the cabin turned to murmurs of disbelief, curiosity, and shock. "8A," the captain's voice asked through the intercom, incredulous. Emily swallowed hard, shaking. I've done flight simulators, college aviation courses. I know the basics," she stammered. A long pause, almost unbearable, followed. Then the captain's voice returned. "You're it. Proceed to the cockpit, quickly, and God help us all." The words were terrifying, almost like a prophecy. Emily's heart raced, but her mind snapped into focus. She moved quickly, almost instinctively, over the legs of panicked passengers, apologizing to those she jostled. Flight attendants stepped aside, giving her a narrow path toward the cockpit. She could see the fear on their faces, but also something else: trust. The passengers around her were frozen, waiting for someone else to act. And now, the responsibility rested on her shoulders. As she reached the cockpit door, she felt the plane tilt sharply, a violent lurch that sent her body slamming against the metal frame. The roar of the engines became deafening, drowning out the screams and cries of passengers behind her. Emily gritted her teeth, forcing herself to remain upright, pushing the fear down, focusing on the steps she had drilled into her memory. She rapped on the cockpit door, trembling slightly. The co-pilot's voice, tight with strain and exhaustion, answered, "You can help. You're a passenger." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I have experience, simulator experience. I know emergency procedures. I can follow instructions." There was silence for a heartbeat. Then, with a barely audible groan, the door unlocked. She slipped inside, the smell of smoke and electronics assaulting her senses. The cockpit was chaos. Red warning lights flashed in a staccato rhythm, alarms blaring with a sound that seemed almost alive. Instruments flickered erratically. The co-pilot's hands hovered over the controls, shaking. The captain's face was pale, eyes wide with both relief and terror. "Thank God," the captain whispered under his breath. Then he addressed her. "You'll follow my instructions. One wrong move and we're finished. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, heart racing, palms sweating. "Yes, I understand." The plane shuddered violently again, rolling slightly to the left. The co-pilot adjusted the controls, trying to stabilize it, but the engines groaned in protest. Outside, clouds swirled ominously, black and foreboding. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cockpit for a fleeting second, revealing the tension etched on every face. "Emily," the captain said, his voice tense, "we're descending too quickly. I need you to monitor altitude, help me calculate throttle adjustments. Follow my lead. Do not panic." Emily's fingers flew over the instruments, her mind racing as she recalled simulation exercises. She tracked altitude, speed, and engine output, repeating numbers aloud to ensure clarity. Altitude 28,000, descending at 3,500 feet per minute, throttle at 70%. The co-pilot muttered something under his breath, a string of curses and prayers. Emily ignored it, forcing herself to focus entirely on the task. One wrong adjustment could send them plummeting into the ground. The plane lurched again, violently this time, knocking a cup of coffee off a console, splattering hot liquid onto the floor. Emily ignored it. Every second counted. From the cabin, the sounds of panic continued, muffled cries, gasps, and the occasional scream. Emily forced herself not to listen, focusing solely on the cockpit. She repeated calculations in her mind, cross-referencing them with the captain's instructions. The plane jolted again, this time sideways, causing a heart-stopping tilt that pressed her body into the seat and the console. She gritted her teeth, fighting against nausea and fear. And then came a new problem. The second engine began to falter. A high-pitched whine filled the cockpit, a sound that made her stomach drop. Red lights flashed more violently, alarms screeched louder. The captain cursed under his breath. "We don't have much time," he said. "We need to stabilize or we'll never reach the runway." Emily's hands moved automatically, adjusting throttles, monitoring gauges, repeating numbers aloud. She caught herself thinking about her parents, imagining them waiting for her at home, unaware of the life-or-death struggle unfolding above the clouds. Her throat tightened, but she pushed the emotion aside. She had no choice. Lives depended on her focus, her ability to act calmly. Outside, the turbulence worsened. The plane rocked like a toy in a storm. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the cabin below as terrified passengers clutched seats and each other, faces pale and eyes wide. Emily could hear muffled cries from 10B. She recognized the child from earlier, and her stomach sank. She had to succeed. Failure was not an option. The captain's voice cut through the chaos, tense and urgent. "We're approaching a critical altitude. We need to glide until the second engine stabilizes. Emily, I'm relying on you to monitor the instruments and call out any anomalies immediately. Do not hesitate. Do you understand?" Emily's voice trembled, but she managed a firm reply. "Yes, I understand. I'm ready." A sudden jolt threw her forward against the console. Red lights flashed, alarms blared, and the plane tilted sharply again. Outside, the runway lights, dim and distant, seemed impossibly far away. Inside, fear and tension filled the air, thick enough to choke. Emily clung to the console, focusing on her calculations, refusing to let panic take over. She knew one mistake could cost everyone their lives. The seconds stretched endlessly, each one a heartbeat suspended in fear. And just as she began to think they might stabilize, a deafening bang shook the plane and the cabin lights flickered violently. The co-pilot's hands froze. The captain's face went pale. Emily's heart pounded in her ears. She had stabilized numbers, adjusted the throttles, and guided the plane through minor corrections. But this was something else entirely, something she hadn't anticipated. The intercom crackled again, not with the captain's voice this time, but with a sharp warning from air traffic control. "Flight 412, runway compromised. Alternate landing sites advised. Emergency teams are on standby, but the clock is ticking. Emily swallowed hard, fear and determination colliding inside her. The moment of truth was approaching. The plane wavered, shuddering under the weight of malfunction and altitude. And Emily knew, deep in her bones, that the next decision could mean life or death for her and everyone on board. She glanced at the captain. His eyes were wide, sweat beading his forehead, and she realized he was counting on her, not just to follow orders but to act. The fate of Flight 412 now rested in the hands of a 22-year-old passenger in 8A, someone who had dreamed about flying but never imagined she'd be fighting for survival at 35,000 feet. The plane lurched again, violently, throwing everything unsecured across the cabin. The child from 10B screamed. Emily gritted her teeth. And then, in a sudden, horrifying moment, the left engine began to fail completely. Emily's stomach dropped. Panic surged, but she forced herself to focus, calculating, adjusting, repeating numbers aloud. She didn't know if it was enough. And as the plane continued its perilous descent, she realized something terrifying. This was only the beginning. Emily's hands shook, but her mind was razor-sharp. She repeated the cockpit instruments to herself, numbers and altitudes forming a rhythm she clung to like a lifeline. The left engine was sputtering dangerously, its whining sound rising in pitch, like metal screaming against the storm. The right engine, the last hope, trembled under strain. Every second counted. Outside, the clouds swirled violently, lightning stabbing through the sky, illuminating the fraught faces of the flight crew and the panic-stricken passengers beyond the cockpit door. The captain's eyes met hers, a mixture of disbelief, hope, and sheer desperation. "We don't have much time. Can you follow instructions perfectly? No errors, Emily. One slip in." He didn't finish, the words dying in his throat as the plane lurched violently. I can," Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. She swallowed the fear tightening her chest. "Tell me what to do." "First," the captain said, pointing at a series of controls, "we need to stabilize the glide. Throttle adjustments in increments of 5%. Monitor the altitude constantly. Call out numbers. Don't stop, don't hesitate." Emily nodded and moved quickly, counting aloud as her fingers pressed the buttons. Throttle at 70%. Altitude 24,000. Descending at 3,000 feet per minute. She repeated each figure, forcing herself to sound calm, to anchor herself in logic and calculation while the chaos roared around her. The plane tilted sharply. The overhead lights flickered and a sharp metallic groan echoed from the failing engines. Emily bit her lip, forcing herself to ignore the fear that threatened to paralyze her. She could hear passengers screaming softly through the thin cockpit walls, could feel the panic pressing down on her. She couldn't fail. Not now, not ever. Suddenly, a warning alarm pierced the cockpit, a flashing red light labeled hydraulic failure. The co-pilot cursed under his breath, slamming a hand to the console. Emily's stomach dropped. This was beyond what she had trained for, beyond simulation. But she didn't freeze. Instead, she forced herself to focus. "Throttle adjustments," she reminded herself. "Keep altitude. Keep glide stable." She moved swiftly, her hands flying over the instruments with a mix of desperation and precision. Numbers rang out in the cramped space. 23,000, descending at 3200, throttle 75. The captain's face was pale, sweat dripping from his brow. "Good, keep it steady. We have runway options, maybe, but not much time." Emily's eyes scanned the radar and instruments, memorizing every detail. She felt the co-pilot's tension pressing down beside her, saw the fear in his hands as they hovered over controls, waiting for her guidance. She forced herself to be decisive. She repeated the altitudes, the descent rates, the throttles, each one a lifeline in a storm that could swallow them whole at any second. Outside, the plane bucked violently, a roller coaster tossed by a furious storm. Lightning illuminated the clouds in jagged, terrifying bursts, casting fleeting shadows across the cockpit. Emily's stomach churned, but she pushed the nausea aside. Each adjustment, each calculation could save lives. She refused to fail. Then came the intercom crackle, muffled but urgent. Flight 412, emergency crews are ready, but conditions are deteriorating. Alternate runways advised. Emily froze for a heartbeat. Alternate runways. There was barely enough fuel and altitude to reach any standard landing strip. She glanced at the captain, whose expression tightened. "We don't have the luxury," he said grimly. "We need to stabilize and land at the nearest airport. You're guiding me." Emily nodded, determination flaring. She had never imagined herself here at the mercy of physics, engines, and raw human survival. But she had to do it. For the passengers. For the little boy in 10B, for everyone counting on her. A sharp jolt threw her body forward, knocking her against the console. She gasped, then refocused, her hands steadying on the controls. She remembered a critical detail from training: maintain glide, reduce drag, keep engine output minimal but steady. Precision mattered. Every microsecond counted. The co-pilot muttered something under his breath, something frantic about turbulence and engine readings. Emily blocked it out, repeating the numbers aloud. 22,000, descending at 3000, throttle 78, glide stable. A sudden tilt to the right made the plane groan alarmingly. Emily adjusted, her heart pounding. Sparks flew from a small panel. The smell of smoke filled the cockpit. The alarms screamed louder. One engine was on the brink, the other struggling. The captain's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and tense. "Emily, the instruments are fluctuating. I need you to recalc the throttle adjustments for the glide. Now." Emily's brain fired on all cylinders. She calculated quickly, mentally running through descent rates, wind speed, altitude, and distance to potential runways. Her hands moved faster than thought, pressing, adjusting, recalculating in real time. "Throttle 80%. Maintain glide. Descending at 3100, she said, voice trembling slightly but firm. The co-pilot's eyes widened. How are you keeping up with all of this?" Emily swallowed. "Focus, follow the numbers, we can do this." The plane shook violently again. Passengers screamed, some crying openly now. A tray table slammed shut. Emily's stomach lurched, but she didn't stop. She repeated each number, double-checked every reading. Each adjustment brought a fraction of stability. She felt the plane respond ever so slightly. Then came a new horror. A loud explosion from the left engine shook the entire cabin. Sparks flew from the instrument panel. Smoke drifted past her shoulder. Emily felt the terror claw at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe, to stay grounded. She repeated the numbers, adjusted, guided, stabilized. The plane quivered but did not fall. The captain's voice was sharp, almost desperate. "Emily, this is it. We're approaching the critical altitude. The runway is within reach, but turbulence is extreme. One wrong move," he didn't finish. Emily's eyes darted between the instruments and the faint outline of lights far below, runway lights, dim but visible through the storm. She realized that the lives of everyone on board rested on her next actions. A tiny miscalculation, a single error, and the lives of over 100 people could end in disaster. Her hands moved faster, guided by adrenaline and instinct. She spoke aloud, every number, every adjustment, letting the captain follow her lead. "Altitude, 19,000, descending at 3050, throttle 79, glide stable." Another violent jolt threw the cockpit into chaos. The plane pitched dangerously, alarms screaming in tandem. Emily felt her chest tighten, fear and determination warping her perception of time. Everything slowed, each heartbeat elongated into a drum of tension, each breath a struggle against panic. Then a voice crackled from the intercom, a voice she recognized, calm but tense. "Flight 412, you are in critical condition. Emergency crews are on standby. Prepare for immediate landing procedures." Emily swallowed hard. This was it. The moment she had been thrust into by fate, by chance, by courage she didn't know she possessed. She glanced at the captain. His eyes were wide, sweat streaking his face, trust and terror intermingling. She nodded to him, determination flaring. "We can do this," she said, almost to herself. "We have to." The plane lurched violently again, as if protesting her audacity. Emily's stomach dropped. She realized the runway was still far, the turbulence growing, the engines on the brink. And somewhere deep inside, a terrifying thought settled. Surviving this wasn't guaranteed, not for anyone. And then, through the roar of alarms, the shaking fuselage, and the fear-stiffened silence of passengers in 8A and beyond, Emily noticed something unusual on the instruments, something the captain hadn't seen yet. A small, blinking light, red and ominous, signaling a malfunction far more critical than they had anticipated. Emily's heart raced. She realized with a cold surge of fear that they weren't just fighting turbulence and engine failure anymore. Something else, something hidden, was threatening the plane. She swallowed, fingers hovering over the controls. One thought screamed in her mind: if we survive this, we'll have to face it. But right now, we have to get the plane down, alive. The plane lurched again, violently. Sparks danced along the console. Emily's teeth clenched. And as she adjusted the throttles, recalculated descent, and repeated every number aloud with mechanical precision, she realized the impossible was now in her hands. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the roar of the engines and the alarms blaring incessantly in the cockpit. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the controls, scanning every gauge, every blinking light, every number. The red warning light she had noticed moments ago was still blinking, small, persistent, ominous. She didn't fully understand it yet, but instinct told her it could change everything. The captain leaned over the controls, his eyes wide with both exhaustion and trust. "Emily, this is beyond anything we've trained for. That warning light, it could indicate total hydraulic failure. If that happens, we lose control completely." Emily swallowed hard. Hydraulic failure meant no flaps, no brakes, no stability. She could almost feel the plane's wings flexing under the strain, the metal groaning under the weight of their descent. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury. Lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating the panic-stricken faces of passengers as the plane lurched violently. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Tell me what to do. I'll follow your instructions." The captain nodded. "We have seconds to stabilize before we attempt to land. Follow me exactly. Throttle incremental increases. Keep glide steady. Monitor all instruments. We don't have a second chance." Emily nodded, eyes locked on the instruments, hands moving with precision. She counted aloud as she adjusted the throttles. Throttle 80%, glide stable, altitude 17,000, descending at 3080. The plane tilted sharply to the left, throwing Emily against the console. Sparks flew from a small panel and smoke curled toward the cockpit ceiling. Her stomach lurched violently, but she didn't flinch. She repeated the numbers, recalculated adjustments, and guided the captain as he made micro-corrections. The engines whined, threatening to give out completely. Then came a new sound, a sharp, unnatural grinding beneath the fuselage, followed by a metallic vibration that reverberated through the entire plane. The captain's eyes widened. "Emily, did you feel that?" She nodded, teeth clenched. "Yes, something's wrong, something's not just with the engines." Outside, the storm intensified. Rain lashed the windows, lightning slicing through the sky in jagged flashes. Emily's gaze flicked from the instruments to the distant runway lights, dim, far away and fading in the chaos. Every instinct screamed danger. The plane could fall at any moment. "Brace for turbulence," the captain warned. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." Emily's hands flew over the controls, stabilizing the glide as best she could. The plane shuddered violently again, rocking like a toy. Sparks flew from the panel. A low metallic groan echoed through the fuselage. The co-pilot's face was pale, jaw tight, hands frozen over the instruments. Emily's mind raced. Hydraulic failure plus engine instability plus severe turbulence. She had read about scenarios like this in simulations, but never with real lives at stake, never with 100 panicked passengers depending on her every calculation. Her stomach churned, her throat burned, but she forced herself to focus. Throttle 82%. Glide stable, descending at 3100, she repeated, her voice a lifeline in the storm. Another violent jolt sent the plane tilting dangerously to the right. Emily gritted her teeth, forcing herself to move faster, to adjust the throttles, to recalculate in real time. Every second stretched into eternity. Sparks danced across the console. Smoke curled toward the cockpit ceiling. Suddenly, the intercom crackled. Flight 412, this is air traffic control. You need to land immediately. Conditions on the primary runway are unstable. Alternate runways are available, but you must decide now. Emily froze for a heartbeat. Alternate runways. She didn't have time to think, to consider options. She had only moments. The plane shuddered again violently. The red warning light blinked insistently. Hydraulic failure loomed. The captain's eyes locked with hers. Emily, you decide which runway. Her mind raced. She glanced at the radar, scanning for distance, wind direction, obstacles. One option was closer but had a shorter approach, riskier but reachable. The other was farther, safer in theory, but the storm might make it impossible to reach. Her heart pounded. She swallowed hard. We have to go for the closer one. She took a deep breath and spoke firmly. We attempt the closest runway. It's risky, but we can make it. The captain nodded. Do it. Emily adjusted the throttles, recalculated descent, and guided the plane as the co-pilot followed her lead. The engines whined, groaned, and protested under the strain, but the plane responded. Slowly, agonizingly, it stabilized. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the rear. The plane shuddered violently. The cabin lights flickered. Emily's stomach dropped. The passengers' screams filtered faintly through the walls, each one cutting into her chest. She realized with a jolt of fear that this was beyond mechanical failure. Something else was happening. The co-pilot's eyes were wide. What was that? Emily shook her head, heart hammering. She didn't know. She hadn't trained for this, but she forced herself to focus. Stabilize, glide, survive. The plane tilted again, dangerously, rolling slightly to the left. Emily's hands moved faster, adjusting, recalculating, repeating numbers aloud. Throttle 85%, glide stable, descending at 3150. The red warning light blinked faster, sparks flickered, smoke thickened. Emily's mind screamed with adrenaline and terror, every muscle in her body tensed. She could feel the plane responding to her adjustments, but barely. Then came the intercom crackle again, almost drowned out by the storm. Flight 412, runway compromised. Emergency crews are ready, but the situation is critical. You must land now. Emily's throat went dry. This was it, the moment that would define life or death. She glanced at the captain. His face was pale, but there was trust in his eyes. He was counting on her. Everyone on the plane was counting on her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to center. We can do this. We have to. Outside, the runway lights appeared, flickering through the storm like distant beacons. Emily's stomach lurched at the sight. They were so far, yet so close. The plane lurched violently again. Sparks flew. Smoke curled. Hydraulic systems groaned. The engines threatened to fail entirely. The captain's voice was tense, almost a whisper. Emily, you're doing great. Keep it steady. Don't panic. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. She repeated the numbers, recalculated adjustments, guided the plane as it fought the storm, the failing engines, and the unknown danger lurking in the systems. Every second was agony, every adjustment a gamble. Then in a sudden horrifying moment, the cockpit shuddered violently, lights flickering. The red warning light blazed, alarms screamed, and a new metallic grinding echoed through the fuselage. Emily realized with a cold shock that they weren't just fighting engines and hydraulics anymore. Something else, something hidden, was sabotaging their flight. Her pulse surged, sweat ran down her face. She gritted her teeth, hands flying over the controls. Throttle 87%, glide stable, descending at 3180. The captain's eyes widened. Emily, that sound, it's coming from the cargo hold. Something's moving, something's loose. Emily's stomach dropped. The passengers, the storm, the failing engines, all of that was bad enough. But now a new, unseen threat loomed, hidden somewhere in the dark belly of the plane. She realized with chilling clarity that surviving the descent was only the first part. What awaited them on the ground, or in the cargo hold, could be even more dangerous. The plane lurched again violently. Sparks flew. Smoke thickened. The storm outside screamed, the engines groaned, and somewhere in the cargo hold, a hidden danger stirred. Emily swallowed hard. She had stabilized the plane, barely, but she knew that the next steps would test every ounce of courage, every skill, every instinct she possessed. Because Flight 412 was far from safe, and the real challenge, the one that could decide life or death for everyone on board, was just beginning. Emily's hands flew over the controls, guided by sheer instinct and the adrenaline flooding her veins. The plane groaned under the strain of failing engines, a shuddering beast fighting the storm outside. Sparks danced across the cockpit console, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Every gauge screamed danger, altitudes fluctuating, throttles groaning, hydraulics threatening collapse. The red warning light from before blinked incessantly, almost like a heartbeat of doom. The captain's eyes, wide and pale, darted between instruments. "Emily, you're keeping us alive, but the engines are deteriorating faster than I anticipated. We need to stabilize descent now." One miscalculation, he didn't finish. The words were unnecessary. The alarms, the groaning fuselage, the screaming passengers, they said it all. Emily's mind raced, tracing patterns from her simulator training, adjusting numbers on instinct. Throttle 89%, glide stable, descending at 3180, she repeated aloud, each syllable a lifeline in the chaos. Her hands moved in tandem with the captain, their silent rhythm almost like a dance. He called commands, she executed. The co-pilot groaned under his breath. "This is impossible. There's no manual for this. No one survives a combination of engine failure, hydraulic instability, and this storm." Emily's stomach churned, but she forced herself to focus. Impossible or not, we survive. 1 second at a time. She adjusted the throttles again, eyes darting to the faint lights of the runway, just visible through the torrential rain and lightning. They were so far, yet so close. Then came a violent jolt. The plane rolled sharply, throwing Emily forward against the console. Sparks flew from a control panel near her shoulder. She gasped but quickly readjusted, recalculating descent, throttle, and glide. 89%, glide stable, descending at 3190, she called out. The captain's voice was urgent. "Emily, hold the glide, don't overcorrect. Engines are barely responding." Emily's hands moved faster, repeating numbers aloud. Outside, lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating a cabin full of terrified passengers. She imagined the mother clutching her child, the elderly man muttering prayers, the little boy in 10B staring wide-eyed at the ceiling, gripping his seat. "They're counting on me. I can't fail." Another alarm shrieked, louder and more insistent than before. Emily's stomach dropped. She realized it wasn't from the engines or hydraulics, it was the cargo hold. That metallic grinding, that persistent vibration she had felt earlier, was now louder, echoing ominously through the fuselage. The captain's face tightened. "Emily, that sound, it's coming from the rear. Something's loose, something dangerous. I don't know what yet." Emily's pulse spiked. She had stabilized the plane's descent as best she could, but now there was another threat, hidden and unknown. This is not just about landing anymore, she thought. It's about surviving whatever is in the cargo hold. A violent gust slammed the plane sideways. Emily's hands gripped the controls, adjusting every micro-movement. Sparks danced along the edges of the console. Smoke curled. The plane's engines groaned, threatening to fail entirely. Every second stretched into an eternity. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, "If we don't make it to the runway soon." He didn't finish, the implication clear. Death was an almost tangible presence in the cockpit. Emily ignored the panic rising inside her. She had one goal: keep the plane in the air, 1 second at a time. Numbers flew from her lips. Altitude 17,000, descending at 3200, throttle 90%, glide stable. Outside, the storm screamed. Rain lashed the windows, lightning stabbing through clouds, illuminating glimpses of terrified passengers below. Emily imagined their fear, their hope, their desperate prayers. She swallowed the lump in her throat and repeated the numbers again. Then a sharp, deafening bang rattled the plane. The fuselage shuddered violently. Sparks erupted from the console. Smoke thickened. Emily's stomach lurched. This was worse than anything she had faced. One engine now threatened total failure. The plane tilted dangerously, threatening to roll. The captain shouted, almost shouting over the alarms, "Emily, you need to keep the glide steady. Don't let it tilt." Emily's hands moved in a blur. Every calculation she had ever memorized, every instinct honed in college simulators, every second of adrenaline-driven focus was now at play. She adjusted throttles, monitored descent, and spoke aloud every number. Throttle 91%, glide stable, descending at 3210, maintain course. The plane lurched again violently, sparks flew, smoke thickened. The grinding from the cargo hold grew louder. Emily's heart pounded. Whatever is back there, it's moving, and it's not just loose cargo. The captain's voice broke through the chaos, trembling. "Emily, the runway, it's just ahead. You can do this. Hold it steady." Emily's gaze snapped to the faint runway lights in the storm, a distant, wavering promise through the chaos. The plane groaned and tilted sharply again, threatening to roll completely. Sparks flared, alarms blared. Emily gritted her teeth, sweat streaming down her face. "We have one chance, one shot." She adjusted throttle, stabilized glide, recalculated descent. Numbers flew from her lips, precise and unwavering. A throttle 92%, glide stable, descending at 3205, hold steady. Then came the most terrifying sound yet. A metallic crash from the cargo hold, followed by a low, continuous grinding that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. The co-pilot's eyes went wide. "Emily, whatever that is, it's moving, and it's huge." Emily swallowed hard. Panic threatened, but she forced it down. She couldn't focus on fear, she had to focus on survival. The plane first, then the cargo hold. One task at a time. She repeated the numbers aloud, adjusting the controls with mechanical precision, guiding the captain as he executed maneuvers under her instructions. The runway lights grew slightly closer, shimmering through the storm like fragile beacons of hope. A sudden tilt pitched the plane violently to the left. Sparks flew across the console. Smoke thickened. The grinding in the cargo hold intensified. Emily's stomach dropped. If we survive this landing, whatever is in the cargo hold may kill us all. The captain's voice was tense but determined. "Emily, you've done the impossible, but brace yourself, this is going to get worse before it gets better." Emily's fingers flew over the controls. She repeated numbers, recalculated glide, stabilized throttle. Her heart hammered. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, alarms screamed. The plane groaned, fighting against physics and chaos. Then a sudden, horrifying thought struck her. The danger in the cargo hold might compromise the landing itself. Her pulse surged, sparks flew, smoke thickened. The plane shuddered violently, lightning flashed, and somewhere in the cargo hold the hidden threat moved again, louder, closer, more dangerous than ever before. Emily's teeth clenched. She realized with cold clarity that surviving the descent was only the first part. What awaited them on the ground, or in the cargo hold, could be even deadlier. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the throttles, repeating numbers aloud. Throttle 93%, glide stable, descending at 3215, runway in sight. The captain's eyes met hers. "Emily, you're our only hope, don't let go." Emily swallowed hard. She didn't let go. The plane lurched violently. Sparks flew. Smoke thickened. And just as the runway lights began to grow closer, a deafening crash from the cargo hold reverberated through the fuselage, louder than anything before. Emily's stomach dropped. She realized with terrifying clarity that the landing wouldn't just be a battle against engines, altitude, and turbulence. It would also be a fight against the unknown force hidden in the belly of the plane. The plane pitched sharply. Alarms screamed. Sparks flew. Smoke thickened. And in that instant, Emily knew one thing with absolute certainty. The real danger of Flight 412 was only just beginning. Emily's knuckles were white on the controls, sweat dripping down her temples as the plane fought against the storm. The runway lights flickered through the sheets of rain like distant, wavering lifelines, tantalizingly close yet maddeningly out of reach. Every nerve in her body screamed that one wrong adjustment could end everything. Sparks erupted from a panel to her right, smoke curling toward the ceiling, and the metallic groan of the engine sounded like a dying beast. The captain leaned over the controls, eyes darting between instruments. "Emily, throttle, keep it steady. We're approaching critical altitude. One slip and we're finished." Emily's voice was calm but firm, repeating numbers aloud like a mantra to keep herself anchored. Throttle 94%, glide stable, descending at 3220, runway in sight. The plane lurched violently. She felt it roll slightly to the left, almost tipping over. Sparks showered across the console. Alarms blared louder, synchronized with her pounding heartbeat. Outside, lightning tore through the sky, illuminating terrified passengers in fleeting, ghostly flashes. Then came the grinding from the cargo hold. A new metallic bang reverberated through the fuselage, sharper and more menacing than before. Emily's stomach twisted. She had stabilized the plane, had kept it from plummeting to the ground, but this was something entirely different. The co-pilot muttered under his breath, "Emily, that sound, it's moving. I don't know what it is, but it's alive or something alive." Emily's pulse surged. She swallowed, forcing fear aside. Focus on the landing first. The cargo hold next. She adjusted the throttle again, eyes darting to the runway lights that seemed impossibly far away. Throttle 95%, glide stable, descending at 3225. The captain nodded sharply. "Good, keep it steady, almost there." The plane tilted again violently. Sparks flew, smoke thickened. The grinding from the cargo hold grew louder, echoing ominously. Emily gritted her teeth. She could hear passengers screaming faintly from below. Somewhere, a child cried. Every sound, every vibration was amplified in the chaos. Emily forced herself to focus, repeating calculations aloud, stabilizing glide, adjusting throttle, guiding the captain as he made micro-corrections. The runway lights were closer now, faintly visible through the storm's chaos. She realized that the landing could still work, if they could just maintain control. Suddenly, another jolt threw the plane violently, tipping it dangerously. Sparks erupted across the console. The alarms screamed in unison. Emily's stomach dropped. She realized with cold clarity that the engines were on the brink of complete failure. The captain shouted, almost over the alarms, "Emily, adjust the throttles now, keep us alive." Her hands moved faster than thought, adjusting, recalculating, repeating numbers aloud. Throttle 96%, glide stable, descending at 3230, runway in sight. The grinding in the cargo hold intensified. Emily felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The plane's fuselage shuddered violently with every movement. Smoke filled the cockpit. Sparks flew like fireflies in a storm. She realized the danger from below was no longer just a threat. It was an active hazard, capable of damaging critical systems if it wasn't contained. The co-pilot's face was pale, jaw tight. "Emily, we might not survive this, whatever's back there." Emily swallowed, forcing herself to block out fear. Focus, glide, survive. She repeated the numbers again, her voice firm despite the chaos. Throttle 97%, glide stable, descending at 3235, runway approaching. The plane lurched again. Sparks erupted from a panel near the throttle, smoke curling upward. Emily adjusted rapidly, sweat dripping into her eyes. The grinding in the cargo hold grew louder, almost like metal scraping against metal, the sound echoing through the cabin. The captain's voice, tense but determined, cut through the chaos. "Emily, we have to land now, you guide. I follow, no mistakes." Emily's throat tightened. The runway lights were closer, but turbulence threatened to throw the plane off course at any moment. Her heart pounded. She could feel the weight of every life on board pressing down on her shoulders. She repeated the numbers aloud, adjusted throttle, stabilized glide. Throttle 98%, glide stable, descending at 3240, runway lights in sight. Another violent jolt nearly threw her from her seat. Sparks flew, smoke thickened, alarms blared. The grinding from the cargo hold now seemed coordinated, deliberate, as if whatever was back there knew they were near safety and wanted to prevent it. The co-pilot's hands shook over the controls. "Emily, what is that thing? It's moving too fast, too heavy, it's going to compromise the landing." Emily swallowed, forcing her mind to focus on what she could control. "We land first. Survive the landing first. Cargo hold after. We can do this." The plane tilted sharply, almost tipping. Emily adjusted throttle, recalculated glide, repeated numbers aloud. Throttle 99%, glide stable, descending at 3245, hold steady, runway ahead. The captain's face was tense but focused. "We're almost there. Emily, hold it steady." Suddenly, another crash from the cargo hold reverberated through the fuselage, louder and more violent than anything before. Sparks erupted from a side panel, and smoke thickened. Emily's stomach dropped. If we survive this landing, whatever is back there might not let anyone leave the plane alive. She forced herself to focus, repeating numbers, adjusting throttle, stabilizing glide. The runway lights grew closer, flickering through the storm like fragile beacons of hope. The plane pitched violently again, sparks flying across the console. Emily's teeth clenched. Sweat dripped down her face. The engines groaned, alarms blared, smoke thickened, and the grinding in the cargo hold intensified. The captain's voice was tense, almost a whisper. "Emily, just a few seconds more, hold it steady." Emily's pulse hammered. The runway was visible now, dangerously close. She adjusted throttle, stabilized glide, repeated numbers aloud. Throttle 100%, glide stable, descending at 3250, runway in sight. The plane lurched violently again, as if protesting their audacity. Sparks flew. Smoke thickened. The grinding from the cargo hold was now deafening, echoing through the fuselage like the roar of a hidden predator. Emily realized, with chilling clarity, that landing safely would only be the first part of their ordeal. The hidden threat in the cargo hold was real, active, and deadly. And as she guided the plane toward the runway, she knew one terrifying truth. Surviving the descent would not guarantee their survival on the ground. The plane pitched once more, violently, sparks flew, smoke thickened, alarms screamed. The runway lights flickered closer. Emily's knuckles were white on the controls. She swallowed, heart hammering, and whispered to herself, "We can survive this. We have to." Then, just as the wheels were about to touch the wet, storm-battered runway, A new, deafening sound erupted from the cargo hold, a metallic crash, louder and more violent than anything yet, and the plane shuddered violently as it made contact with the runway. Emily's stomach lurched. Sparks erupted across the cockpit. Smoke thickened. And in that instant she realized that the true test was only beginning. The cargo hold's hidden danger had not been neutralized, and it was about to confront them all. Emily's hands trembled as she guided Flight 412 along the slick, rain-soaked runway. The tires screamed against the asphalt as water sprayed in violent sheets, each second stretching into eternity. The storm still raged around them, lightning flashing across the blackened sky, illuminating the panic-stricken faces of passengers through the cabin windows. Sparks still flickered in the cockpit, smoke drifting from the panels as the engines groaned in exhaustion. The plane slowed incrementally, every motion precise. Emily's voice rang out, calm yet commanding. Throttle down, brake gently, maintain glide, stabilize, almost there. The captain gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his temples. We're almost stopped, almost stopped. Finally, with a shuddering lurch and a final screech of tires, Flight 412 came to a halt. Silence followed, a fragile, tentative quiet that stretched across the storm-lashed tarmac. Emily's chest heaved, heart hammering, as she exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The runway lights flickered in the storm, glistening off the wet asphalt like tiny beacons of fragile hope. For a moment it seemed the nightmare was over. Passengers screamed in relief, hugged each other, prayed, and sobbed. Emily allowed herself a brief glance at the crew. The captain wiped sweat and tears from his face, shaking his head in disbelief. You did it," he murmured. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. Not yet, not safe yet. The grinding from the cargo hold continued, louder now, resonating through the fuselage with a terrifying, rhythmic persistence. Her stomach twisted. The plane had landed, but the threat they had felt throughout the descent had not dissipated. The co-pilot swallowed hard. "Emily, whatever's in the cargo hold, it's still moving, and it's big." Emily nodded grimly. "We need to investigate, immediately." The captain's eyes widened. "You're not going back there, whatever's in that hold could." "I have to," Emily said firmly. "If we don't neutralize it, everyone is still in danger." The storm beat against the plane, thunder rolling through the sky like drums of impending doom. Emily unbuckled her harness, glancing at the emergency hatch leading to the cargo hold. Sparks still flickered around the cockpit, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Each breath she took felt heavier, the adrenaline surging through her veins like liquid fire. The co-pilot's voice was tense. "Emily, don't do it alone. We can help. We have to coordinate." Emily nodded. "Fine, but we need to act fast. Whatever it is, it won't wait." Together, the trio moved toward the rear of the plane. The cabin was chaotic, passengers trembling, gripping seats and each other, watching the crew with wide, fearful eyes. Emily's focus sharpened, every nerve on high alert. She could hear the grinding sound again, louder, more deliberate, like something alive, moving with purpose. They reached the cargo hold door. Emily's hand hovered over the latch, heart hammering. She glanced at the captain. "Ready." He nodded, "Ready." Emily pulled the latch, swinging the heavy door open. A gust of humid, storm-laden air swept into the hold. Darkness stretched ahead, illuminated only by the faint emergency lights lining the floor. The grinding continued, a metallic, purposeful sound that echoed through the cargo hold. Emily stepped in, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the shadows, illuminating rows of cargo crates, some tipped over, others shaking violently. Her stomach twisted. The sound wasn't random, it was coming from one specific crate near the back. She approached cautiously. The grinding intensified. Her flashlight caught a glimpse of movement, something large, metallic, and alive shifting inside the crate. "Emily, what is that?" the co-pilot whispered, voice tense. Emily swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the crate. "I don't know, but it's dangerous. Stay back." The crate shuddered violently, then then split slightly along one seam. A pair of glowing red eyes reflected the flashlight beam. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. The figure inside was massive, bigger than a man, with mechanical appendages and a glinting metallic frame. It moved with deliberate precision, like a predator waiting to strike. The grinding ceased. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the storm outside. Emily's pulse raced. She realized with terrifying clarity this was not just loose cargo, it was engineered, alive, and it was aware. The mechanical creature shifted forward, breaking free from the crate. Sparks flew from its joints. Emily's stomach dropped. The crew froze, unsure whether to flee or fight. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, scanning the cargo hold, settling on Emily. "Step back," the captain shouted. Emily didn't move. She squared her shoulders, flashlight trained on the creature. Adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpened instincts taking over. Think, react, survive. The creature lunged forward, metallic limbs clanging against the floor. Sparks flew from contact with crates and metal panels. Emily jumped back, heart pounding, guiding the others to safety as the creature advanced. The co-pilot whispered urgently, "Emily, we need to trap it." Emily's mind raced. There were crates, straps, and panels. Improvised weapons, but could they contain it? She noticed a heavy steel panel on the floor. "Push it into the corner, we can trap it," she shouted. The crew scrambled, throwing themselves into action. Emily coordinated movements, shouting instructions, her heart hammering in her chest. Sparks flew, metal clanged, and the creature lashed out, striking the walls with terrifying force. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they maneuvered the creature into a corner. Emily and the captain slammed the steel panel across its front. It thrashed violently, sparks flying as metal met metal. The grinding continued, louder than ever, before slowly fading. Emily collapsed against the nearest crate, chest heaving, sweat soaking her hair. "Is it contained?" she whispered. The co-pilot's hands shook. "For now, but it's still alive, it's still thinking." The captain shook his head, pale but relieved. You just survived the impossible, Emily. But this isn't over. Whoever or whatever sent this, they're not done." Emily swallowed, realizing the truth. They had survived the descent, the storm, the failing engines. They had survived the landing. But the mechanical predator in the cargo hold, and the mystery of why it was there, was far from resolved. Her pulse surged. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside Flight 412, a new terror had taken root. Emily's hands shook, but her eyes were fierce. "We need to get everyone off the plane," she said, voice steady. "And then we figure out who sent this, who wants to destroy us." The captain nodded. "Agreed, but be careful, one wrong move," he didn't finish. Emily swallowed hard. She glanced at the glowing red eyes behind the steel panel. Sparks flickered along its joints, a constant reminder. The threat was alive, aware, and relentless. She took a deep breath. We survived the storm, we survived the landing. Now we survive the rest. And somewhere deep in the cargo hold, the creature's red eyes glowed, unblinking, as if it knew the battle was far from over. Emily's chest heaved, muscles taut with exhaustion as she stared at the creature trapped behind the steel panel. Sparks flickered from its joints, and its red eyes glowed like molten coals, unblinking, intelligent. Every instinct screamed danger. The plane was quiet now, almost eerily so, save for the occasional drip of water from the storm outside and the distant hum of the engines cooling. The passengers were slowly evacuated through the rear doors, guided by the captain and crew. Fear etched into every face. Some were crying, some trembling, all shaken. Emily kept her eyes on the cargo hold, heart hammering. One misstep, one failed barrier, and the mechanical predator could strike, and Flight 412 could become a tomb. The captain approached cautiously. "Emily, we need to contain it for good. If we just leave it here, it could endanger the airport, the rescue crews, everyone." Emily nodded, adrenaline sharpening her focus. "Agreed. We need to immobilize it completely. We can't just hope the panel holds." The co-pilot looked around desperately. "How? It's too strong for ropes and the crate isn't enough. We don't have any heavy equipment in the cabin." Emily's eyes scanned the cargo hold, searching for any improvised solution. That's when she saw the emergency fire extinguisher, mounted low on the wall, metal heavy. Her mind raced, adrenaline and fear coiling together. We need to act fast. One wrong move and... She grabbed the extinguisher and approached cautiously. "I'll get it immobilized," she said, voice tight but steady. "You guys keep the panel in place. Timing is everything." The co-pilot swallowed hard, nodding. Sparks still flew from the creature's metal limbs as it thrashed behind the steel panel. Emily could hear its grinding, like gears meshing, calculating, aware. She forced herself to breathe, each step measured. "On my mark," she whispered, gripping the extinguisher. 3, 2, 1. She slammed the fire extinguisher onto the creature's exposed leg, striking with all her strength. Sparks erupted as metal collided. The creature recoiled, grinding and screeching, but the steel panel held firm. Emily struck again, this time on the shoulder joint, levering it backward. It thrashed violently and sparks shot across the hold. "Hold it steady," Emily shouted, voice cutting through the chaos. The captain and co-pilot pushed the steel panel with all their might. The creature screeched, red eyes glowing brighter, sparks flying like fireworks in a storm. Emily hit again, precision strikes along vulnerable joints she had noticed during the initial chaos. The creature faltered, mechanical whirring growing slower, grinding noises weakening. Its movements became jerky, less coordinated. Sparks flew, smoke rising thicker than ever. With one final, forceful blow, Emily struck the main joint connecting its legs to the torso. The creature's thrashing slowed to a halt, then stopped entirely. Red eyes dimmed to a faint glow. The grinding ceased. Silence fell across the cargo hold, broken only by heavy breathing. Emily staggered back, chest heaving, sweat pouring down her face. She allowed herself a brief glance at the crew. The captain nodded grimly. "You did it. You saved everyone." She swallowed, shaking. We all did. But we need to call security and figure out what this is and who sent it." Outside, emergency crews began to arrive. Storm raging still, but their presence a glimmer of hope. Emily guided the captain and co-pilot to secure the cargo hold, keeping the mechanical predator contained until authorities could take over. Finally, passengers were safely evacuated. Emily stood near the rear doors, soaked and exhausted, watching the crew help each frightened passenger onto waiting ambulances and buses. Every face she saw, the child in 10 holding his mother's hand, the elderly man shaking but alive, etched into her memory. She realized that, despite everything, life had been preserved. The captain approached her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you were amazing, not just with the plane but with the cargo hold. You kept everyone alive." Emily nodded, still catching her breath. "I just did what I had to do. We all did." The authorities arrived at the plane, cordoning off the cargo hold and assessing the situation. Agents and engineers peered inside, examining the mechanical predator she had faced. Emily watched as they began to take control. One engineer, eyes wide, murmured to another, "This isn't a typical drone or prototype. Someone engineered this for a specific purpose. It's autonomous, almost intelligent." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Someone had sent this and it wasn't random, but she refused to dwell on it now. First, the lives saved. First, the passengers safe. Then the answers could come. The storm finally began to wane, rain easing, winds lessening. Emily looked at the sky through the cockpit windows. Lightning flashed one last time, illuminating the runway where Flight 412 had narrowly survived. She felt a surge of relief, but also a weight. The mechanical predator, the mysterious sabotage, it wasn't over. The captain turned to her, voice soft but firm. "Emily, you proved something today. Courage isn't just bravery, it's focus, precision, and the will to act when everything is against you. You saved lives, and you survived the impossible. Emily swallowed, heart pounding, eyes glistening. We survived because we stayed focused, because we worked together, because we didn't panic. A passenger approached cautiously, a young mother holding her child. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Emily nodded, voice tight. "Just take care of each other. That's the most important thing." As authorities secured the plane and investigated the cargo hold, Emily finally allowed herself a deep breath. She felt exhaustion, yes, but also the quiet pride of someone who had faced unimaginable odds and survived. Somewhere in the back of her mind, though, a question lingered, haunting, insistent. Who had engineered the mechanical predator? And why had it been sent onto Flight 412? The storm had passed, but the mystery remained. Emily walked down the wet tarmac, past emergency crews and passengers, the plane looming behind her, a battered but surviving monument to courage, quick thinking, and sheer willpower. She looked up at the storm clouds parting, and in that fleeting moment of calm, she allowed herself hope. They had survived, against the storm, against failing engines, against a mechanical predator that seemed unstoppable. And though the answers weren't yet clear, Emily knew one thing with certainty. She had faced the impossible, and she had prevailed. But somewhere, in the shadows of a hidden laboratory or a secret facility, someone had been watching. Someone who now knew that Flight 412 had survived, and they would not let it end here. Emily's hands were still shaking, her mind still racing, but a spark of determination lit her eyes. She would be ready. Next time she would be ready. The camera would pan back to the battered plane, emergency lights reflecting off wet asphalt, the storm clearing and the world breathing a collective sigh of relief. But the sense of suspense remained. Because survival, Emily realized, was only the beginning.